The Phoenicians lived in a world filled with gods. Every harbor, every harvest, every storm was the domain of a divine force watched, influenced, or guided by powers older than memory. Their religion was polytheistic, complex, and deeply connected to the Canaanite roots from which they emerged. At its center stood Baal, the storm god, giver of rain and fertility, worshipped with the roar of thunder and the smoke of sacrifice. In times of drought or harvest, he was the god to whom the people cried out. Beside him was Astarte, goddess of love, war, and the moon fierce and beautiful, adorned with doves and lions. Her temples rang with music and offerings, and her symbols spread from Tyre to Carthage, Cyprus to Sicily. Then there was Melkart, the protector god of Tyre, a divine king, patron of the city, and later honored by Greek writers as a version of Heracles. His festivals blended fire, sea, and sacrifice, a hero's god for a maritime people. Each Phoenician city had its own pantheon, but there was overlap of shared sacred language. In Byblos, the goddess Balak Gabel. In Sidon, Astarte held sway. Yet across the Phoenician world, their gods traveled with them, embedded in their temples, ships, and offerings. Worship wasn't separate from life, it was embedded in every act. Business deals made in temple courtyards, voyages launched under divine blessing, children named after gods. This was a faith without rigid scriptures or orthodoxy, a religion of practice, presence, and place. The gods of Phoenicia were many, but they were always near as constant as the sea and as rooted as the stone beneath their cities. In Phoenician life, the temple was more than a place of worship. It was a center of economy, ritual, and power, the meeting ground of gods, kings, and merchants. Most cities had at least one major temple, often raised on a platform or overlooking the harbor. Here, priests conducted daily offerings to the gods, animal sacrifices, libations of oil or wine, and ritual prayers. Each act was designed to secure favor for good harvests, safe voyages, or the health of the city. Worship was both personal and public. Families brought offerings to household gods, while the whole city might gather for festivals, with music, food, and ceremonial processions. Some temples collected donations and tithes, storing grain, silver, and trade goods, making them economic institutions as well as sacred spaces. Temples also played a political role. Kings performed rituals as divine intermediaries, and some temples had their own treasuries and administrators functioning like religious banks. Civic decisions were often made near or within temple courtyards, where law, ritual, and community converged. One of the most controversial aspects of Phoenician religion comes from classical sources like Plutarch and Diodorus, who claim that in times of great crisis, child sacrifice was practiced, particularly in Carthage. Archaeological sites such as Tophets, burial areas for young children have been linked to these accounts, but scholars continue to debate whether they reflect actual ritual sacrifice or high infant mortality combined with symbolic burial. The evidence remains inconclusive. What is certain is that Phoenician religion was ritualized, embedded, and deeply respected. In every city, from Byblos to Carthage, the temple was a place where gods met people and where belief shaped both the sacred and the civic. In Phoenician society, temples were not just sacred, they were sovereign. And those who led them, the priests, held authority that reached far beyond ritual. Priests were drawn from elite families, educated in ritual, astronomy, and law. They oversaw daily offerings, interpreted omens, managed temple wealth, and maintained divine order. In many cities, they also served as judges, advisors, and guardians of tradition. Their authority was religious, but also deeply administrative. In some cases, that sacred authority extended all the way to the throne. Certain Phoenician kings held priestly titles, performing sacrifices and overseeing festivals in person. This fusion of roles strengthened royal legitimacy. The king was not just a ruler, but a representative of the gods. In Tyre and Carthage especially, religious and political leadership often overlapped. Temples themselves were among the most powerful institutions in the city. They owned land, collected tithes and offerings, and managed labor forces. Temple estates produced grain, wine, and textiles. Temple treasuries stored silver, kept financial records, and even issued loans. In many ways, the temple was both a spiritual sanctuary and a kind of city bank. Priests also controlled sacred knowledge. They preserved genealogies, trained scribes, and performed rites that linked the people to their gods. Their authority was not enforced through armies, but through custom, literacy, and ritual power, a quiet but enduring influence. To walk into a Phoenician temple was to step into the nerve center of the city, where belief, economy, and politics were braided together under the watchful eyes of gods and their earthly stewards. Phoenician art was a mirror not just of what they believed, but of where they had been and whom they had touched. In temples, palaces, workshops, and tombs, they crafted a world that blended local identity with global influence. Their artisans borrowed freely and skillfully. From Egypt, they adopted lotus flowers, sphinxes, and falcon motifs. From Mesopotamia, they drew on winged beings, mythic beasts, and geometric precision. From the Aegean, they absorbed flowing lines, marine imagery, and ceramic forms. But they didn't merely copy, they synthesized. A Phoenician seal might show a Mesopotamian-style guardian next to a Canaanite sacred tree. An ivory plaque might blend Egyptian posture with Phoenician script. Their work was hybrid by design, a visual language meant to bridge cultures. Popular motifs included winged sphinxes, griffins, sacred trees, and solar disk symbols of power, protection, and divine order. These appeared on amulets, jewelry, furniture inlays, stone reliefs, and especially ivory carvings, which were highly prized in foreign courts. This adaptability wasn't just artistic, it was strategic. By crafting objects that felt familiar to multiple cultures, Phoenician artisans made their products desirable across Egypt, Assyria, Greece, and beyond. Their art became a common visual currency of the Mediterranean elite. And in their colonies, art served as a cultural glue blending Eastern forms with local traditions. Whether in Mocha, Carthage, or Gadir, you could find Phoenician gods carved in local stone, wearing hybrid crowns under foreign skies. Phoenician art was not monumental like Egypt's or philosophical like Greece's. It was interwoven, portable, symbolic, connective. Through art, the Phoenicians told a story not of domination, but of dialogue, creativity, and adaptation. Phoenician cities were not built to impress, they were built to work. To support trade, house families, protect sacred sites, and survive on rugged terrain. Their architecture reflected not grand empire, but practical brilliance rooted in geography and need. Most cities sat on narrow strips of coastline, hemmed in by mountains and sea. Instead of straight grids, Phoenician streets often followed the natural slope of the land, winding, layered, and compact. Homes were built on terraces, sometimes stacked 2 or 3 stories high, with stone foundations and wooden upper floors. At the heart of the city stood the temple, not always massive, but richly decorated. Religious buildings were adorned with carved columns, colored tiles, and sacred engravings. Altars stood in courtyards, surrounded by storage rooms, archives, and priest quarters. These were both spiritual centers and architectural anchors. Urban planning prioritized function. Cities like Tyre and Sidon had fortified walls, watchtowers, and stone gates. Defensive structures were essential not just against invaders, but to control harbors, markets, and civic life. Harbors were masterworks of Phoenician design. Docks, breakwaters, and artificial basins created safe mooring spaces even in rocky bays. Cities like Tyre had dual harbors, one for military vessels, the other for trade, a sophisticated layout rarely seen elsewhere in the ancient world. Markets, workshops, and warehouses clustered near the port. Beyond them, houses, gardens, and shrines filled the rising slopes. Each city was unique, shaped by local needs, but all shared a balance of trade, faith, and defense. To walk through a Phoenician city was to see function in motion, a living network of stone, wood, ritual, and salt air tied together by the sea. In the heart of every Phoenician city, you could hear the hiss of flame, the clang of metal, and the hum of skilled hands at work. The Phoenicians were not just traders, they were artisans, and their craft was known from Egypt to Iberia. They were masters of glass blowing among the first to create core-formed glass vessels, small, colorful bottles used for perfumes and oils. These pieces shimmered in blue, green, and gold, as delicate as they were durable. Found in tombs and palaces, they became symbols of elegance and refinement. Their metalworkers shaped bronze and gold into tools, jewelry, and religious objects. Bracelets, pendants, and rings were adorned with lions, wings, sun discs drawn from multiple traditions, but always bearing a Phoenician signature of detail and balance. Phoenician ivory inlay was famous. Artisans carved panels for furniture, boxes, and decorative items. Scenes often featured hybrid animals, sacred trees, and stylized figures. These ivories were prized in foreign courts, especially in Assyria and Israel, where they adorned the thrones and walls of kings. Perhaps most iconic of all was textile dyeing, especially with Tyrian purple. mantle made from the mucus of murex sea snails. It took thousands of snails to dye a single cloak. The result? A rich royal purple worn only by the elite, from Levantine rulers to Roman emperors. These luxury goods weren't just beautiful, they were portable ambassadors of Phoenician culture. In every corner of the Mediterranean, their work was traded, copied, and coveted. In glass, gold, ivory, and purple, the Phoenicians expressed not only skill but identity. Their craft was legacy, made visible a heritage of form, color, and mastery that still dazzles today. From the docks of Tyre to the temples of Sidon, Phoenician life moved to the rhythms of trade, family, and ritual. Beneath the elegance of their art and the reach of their ships lay a deeply stratified society where birth, wealth, and education shaped every experience. At the top were kings, often connected to priesthood or elite merchant clans. They ruled city-states, managed diplomacy, and presided over religious festivals. Beneath them stood priests, scribes, and merchant elites, the educated minority who kept records, interpreted law, and ran overseas networks. Most people were craftsmen or laborers, artisans, sailors, weavers, potters, metal workers whose skill supported both the city and its exports. Their lives centered on family compounds, where multiple generations shared small stone homes clustered in winding neighborhoods. Cooking, weaving, and trading often took place just outside the doorway. For women, roles varied. Elite women may have held religious offices or managed estates, while others worked in textile production, midwifery, or local markets. Children were raised within the rhythms of trade and temple life, learning by doing rather than formal schooling. At the base of society were servants and likely slaves, though records are sparse. Some were foreign captives. Others may have entered servitude through debt. Their lives were hard laboring in docks, kilns, and homes, though some might eventually gain freedom or status. Literacy was not widespread. Reading and writing were tools of power, limited to priests, scribes, and merchant leaders. For everyone else, knowledge was passed down orally through song, story, and sacred ritual. To live in a Phoenician city was to live in layers sacred and secular, wealthy and poor, seafaring and domestic, all woven together by tradition, commerce, and the steady presence of the gods. In the homes, temples, and marketplaces of Phoenician cities, women played vital roles not always recorded in official histories, but present in the rhythms of daily life, family lineage, and sacred tradition. Women were the keepers of the household, overseeing food, textiles, child-rearing, and small-scale trade. In artisan families, they worked as weavers, perfume mixers, and vendors, contributing both labor and income. Their names, though rarely inscribed in stone, were carried through generations in oral memory. In religion, women took on prominent roles, especially as priestesses of Astarte, the goddess of love, fertility, and war. In cities like Sidon and Byblos, and especially in colonies like Carthage, priestesses led processions, performed music and ritual dances, and maintained temple spaces. Some held official titles and conducted rites alongside male priests. In elite families, women could hold property, manage estates, and make dedications at temples. Inscriptions from Byblos, Tyre, and Carthage occasionally preserve female names linked to donations, construction, or lineage. Though they did not hold formal civic office, their influence within noble houses could be substantial. Marriage was central to social structure. Families arranged unions for economic and political alliances. Wives were expected to maintain religious observance and family honor. Children were raised with stories of gods, sailors, and sacred rites bound into a web of lineage, trade, and tradition. While Phoenician society was patriarchal, it left space, especially in spiritual life, for female visibility and power. In the flickering oil lamps of temple courtyards, in the fabric of homes, and in the names carved softly in stone, the presence of women endures.